Good morning, welcome to the festival. This morning I'm going to read a long poem that's called Observations of Old Light. It's an elegy of sorts, and it's prefaced by two epigraphs. One is from the late poet Karen Freeborn. I'm not sure if the butterfly was meant to be ground and drunk, a papery blue poison to force me light and high and breathless, or if we were supposed to keep it in reverent admiration until death crumbled into Spanish lace. But later, when I went to the jar, it had flown. The second is from the poet Jill Brooks. To write about gaps, I have to pretend there are none. The thing that is missing is the beginning. All I can tell you is that I was writing something about a man I had loved for a while and hated for a while. F knew all about that. This is the beautiful thing about friends. They are not poems needing footnotes by way of explanation. I was sitting in the tram at the table by the mirror. The university is closed now, and besides, this is where we go to write, F and I. Or went to write. Time is always a problem in writing, but a new poem is like new love. Time is what it takes to know how to stroke it into life. I was thinking about Pushcart, who said, "For the heart, life is simple. It beats for as long as it can, and then it stops." I was imagining the force required to stop the human heart from anything. Writers are like Schopenhauer's porcupines, constantly shuffling between aversion and hostility. Freud says this is all about repression. Freud says we overlook difficulties to sustain our alliances. Sometimes F would tell me, "You don't really understand line breaks. You're trying to hear what isn't there instead of what is." I smile at the porcupines. We are all faintly villainous. What monstrosity means depends on its manifestation, F said, the year I was teaching Richard III. I was having trouble with him until she explained, he is funny, evil and sexy and funny. And you love bad boys. Judas, Hemingway, Heathcliff, Byron. The penny dropped. Everyone has a thing, F said. Your thing is machismo. Well, if it is true, it is not a useful thing to have. It is not an easy way to love. Machismo is just a kind of bruise pressing on two people at the same time. At our old table in the tram, I took out a line break. Ordered tea and olives for old time's sake. But this barman was not the barman who gave us free olives, and even time works differently now. Light was fading. The moon wandered in, and the stars. I was irritated because I was alone, or by the worn cliche about old light, wasn't sure which. The night sky is just the reminder of where something living used to be. For a while, I stopped understanding why we're all still staring at it. Now my son is studying transient astronomy. He tells me about distant gamma bursts and supernovas. Active stellar phenomena, he says, anything that isn't dead. The problem seems to be astrophysicists are mostly talking to the dead, listening for what isn't there. Mostly astrophysicists don't actually know what they should be observing. It's never been seen. This is why they have to keep looking at all times, my son tells me. They are waiting to see what has never been seen. That metaphor of the old dead stars. I have found it beautiful myself. All that reckless distance crushed into the small cosmic swell we can see. Our cells hum with stardust. At cellular level, we are older than light. I want to find this impossible, but this is the year we'll be unable to explain to future generations, and I am revising what I am prepared or not prepared to believe. I'm still waiting for the Deus Ex Machina. I'm waiting for a shark to fly in the storm. And the comet is coming. The gas tail of a different comet tore up the sky above 1,000 Norman ships. An autumn night perforated with omens, lighting the passage to England. Not quite 1,000 ships, but a bruised black night splashed full of heart fire, and the Mora cursing her quiet way through the waves. This is not guesswork. This is stitched into La Telle du Conquest. Long-haired star. Star that looks like a sword. What Shakespeare wrote when the comet returned above the Thames. The heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes. Verse that made stars glitch loose from the spheres. Shakespeare knew stars are not makeshift things, they are not meant to fall. But that was in 1607, and today I am happy to be transient. In 1705, Edmund Halley used Newton's theories of gravity to prove that 3 comets were in fact one returning. Not celestial wanderers, but predictable orbiters of the sun, burning their way back around. Still, to flare just once in the dark doesn't seem such a terrible thing. These days, my only wish is to be new. Of love and hate, Girindra Sekar Bose wrote to Freud, all wishes are pleasurable, and it is only when they are in conflict that unpleasantness arises. I can attest to this. The man I both loved and hated had recently told me I was his best friend. The conflict lay not in whether or not I wanted to hear this, but the fact he only told me because F had died. So you see why it surprised me when F sat down with her pen, unfolding herself in the mirror like a lily, a shimmer, like watching something running through a sheet of rain. Earl Grey, she said, quite casually, as if bergamot resolved everything. Jack and Coke, I said, because F was not the sort of person to drink tea in a bar. But you're dead, I said. Well, technically, she said. Not just technically, I said, but perhaps the most important thing is what happens after the story ends. Wait a minute, I said. Haven't we had this conversation before? We had, a long time ago, in the Périgord Noir, sitting round the kitchen table at Le Verger, the butterfly between us over a coffee jar, undecided in its dying. The limp blue silence of stilled wings. Was it dead? Was it not dead? Beyond the open window, there was the soft-lit lake, breathing. The smell of salt and rosemary and shadowed mountain sounds. The Périgord is the cradle of mankind, but even here, we could not say for sure what death was, if breathing was the same as living, if it was lung or heart or mind that meant life. I've always had a fetish for French lace curtains and a tattoo of light. I was thinking of Hemingway. And F was already writing a poem about the butterfly, or black magic, or the hum of the Möbius strip, the inside-outness of death. Can we stop using that word, F asked? Can we say, there is just such a lot of everything now? Or maybe everything was time, or perhaps time had slowed way down, so you couldn't tell days apart, which is almost how things were in the living world, and also not, because the truth was in the end there had not been days enough at all. And now F was standing in a faraway field, one of those dark fenland fields with a snow globe of sky, while I was caught in something tiny and lidded, an oubliette, smeared and foul and sticky with whatever time spits out here in the slowness of 3 dimensions. And suddenly, I felt unspeakably alone. I wondered if F remembered the chapel high up in the hills above Savignac-Ledrier, how he walked there from Le Verger without meaning to, an upwards path instead of down. It is high up in my mind, but it's possible it was just an ordinary place. And it wasn't the pines, but the sky that made me think of my first love. My first love was an artist who read that Dante Gabriel Rossetti primed his canvases 12 times, so he primed his canvases 12 times. Skies of soft glacier blue, sky slipping around in its colours, and so many sad prayers wrapped in paper inside the white church walls. My cynicism says they've gone unanswered. But maybe there really is a girl in Limoges whose tumour was just a summer storm. Maybe the traffic lights were green on every street. Somewhere a hand broke the obsidian shell of a wave. Or maybe there were doctors who called time of death only to find 10 last minutes in which everything could now suddenly be said. But I can't reconcile this with all the sacred trades of history, the souls exchanged for magic beans. I haven't known anyone come back from the underworld and stay. But just another evening in an izakaya by the Kafuku Electric Railroad would be collateral enough. Even Basho wanted more of Kyoto. What human beings would give for just one more of anything. I, for example, had a dream in which F knocked on my lecture room door, glorious in evening dress, ready to steal a car. But I have to get back to class, I said, in my dream. Maybe it was 12 times or 5 times. My first love did not reply to my fact-checking text about Rossetti. But what I understand about priming is that you have to wait for the layers to dry, and waiting is not painting. I've heard a professor call this manifest yearning, or not exactly this, but something like this. All I know is I am too impatient for prayer. I've been photographing the eucalypts outside my window for 23 weeks now, once for every day of this long sickness. It was winter when I started. It will be normal by Christmas, they're saying, but the trees drink the sun and are quiet. They have waited for darker things to pass than this. Remember the dog that followed us home? Remember when we waited in the elevator, but it was out of service? We just stood there. Why did we stand there so long? Remember when your hair looked like a cockerel? It really did look like a cockerel. Remember when I died during lockdown, F said. We laughed like it wasn't true, like it wasn't the case that everything that would happen to F had happened now. I just want someone to touch me, I said. And F agreed. Sometimes it's all any of us need, to collide with another being, an object, a plant, a pen. The Gemini North telescope recorded just for a second an optical afterglow from the joining of 2 neutron stars. Sometimes I remember swimming, when really what I want to feel is the seaworthy currents in me, upwelling again. So I reached out, and there were the atoms of her, even though all the life had gone. But it was a kind of touch anyway. Words inked on her body were more real than skin. We're all just energy, F said. See, I get that stuff now. And she stroked my hair like lovers do and said, I can still hear the noise of the world. It's a loud, loud world, the one she had left, it's true. There are more things alive in it than I knew, I said, to no one in particular. And the cells of my hair concurred. Even a satellite whir, I'll take that as life. Knotweed, peaches, all so alive. And what about the fibres of these panties I'm wearing? Their shadow memory of white cloud fields. There are reports of smartphones laughing. I'm afraid of what's there in the asteroids. I heard on the radio, cancer is not the enemy of the body, but the body itself, fervent and keen, just trying too hard to make more of itself, more life. I cried to learn this. Who of us hasn't tried to be more than we are? And perhaps even death is just a secret form of life. F's hair was looking better than mine, for example. I don't need to wax anymore, she said, so that's nice. But how does it work? I asked, thinking she might pass on a message to my old husband. My first husband, I mean. We were both so young. His pancreas had swelled into a poisoned watermelon of a thing. Although we had nothing left to say to each other in life, we'd used it all up. Love, or whatever it is lovers claim to mark each other with. If marriage teaches you anything, it's all the qualities you would not need to live alone. Für 20 Jahre habe ich in Berlin gewohnt, besuchte dort das Bertolt Brecht Haus. Don't stab the carpets, hat die Kunstvermittlerin auf Englisch gesagt. Meaning our shoes, we assumed, the heels of our shoes. I wondered what quiet visit to the museum resulted in the precision of this warning. But years later, I learned how to trample a man's back. And then I understood. The careful dance around membrane and bone, one foot on the body, the other on the floor, as if stepping off a jetty into the night water, shocking and dark. Newton's second law of motion, the tender balance of weight and threat. I never knew what part was the erotic part, the pain or the promise of pain. The boy in the shop who sold me the bitch boots asked how I would walk in them. I told him. I'm not going to walk in them. Would he have blushed less if I told him about Newton and the Swiss mathematician Nicolas Fatio de Douai, who in 1692 wrote to his beloved, "I could wish, sir, to live all my life, or the greatest part of it, with you." Which is the better story, the thing I planned to do with the boots, or my theories of Newton's Cambridge rooms, Fatio at his feet, half dreaming of the mountain Spitze, blading up through the sweet soft clouds of Lillemand? Such hard, forbidden angles in their light, such solid mass, its pull, the acting force of all the things we want and cannot have. The body in motion will remain in motion. There are irreversible processes that cannot return both the system and the surroundings to their original conditions. I'm having trouble separating entropy and ecstasy. I'm having trouble with the universal laws of force. When I first saw my husband in the ICU, his belly was the size of mercury, taut and mosaicked with sepsis, a toxic sea inside his shining skin. And I still loved him, forgetting how sometimes he would lock me in the house. You wonder why anyone would risk a fractured spine, but if the boy in the shoe shop had asked me, I would have said, the real agony of living is how we spend so much of it trembling, all of us, waiting for the stiletto heel to fall. I don't bloody know how it works, F said, thinking of this trouble we both had with navigation. Remember when we got lost in... Maybe she saw all my secrets now. Although we didn't have so many secrets, F was always inside the fortress wall, always waiting on the ramparts, draw hand on the anchor point. Once she said, I had to sledgehammer my way in because the machinery of me was broken. I used to be colder even than this. We were walking on East Road past the courthouse. Every third car had a siren and her words were sucked into the wind. But it's true. What's impossible for the ear, we hear by heart. If only you knew what words would pull the pin out of the grenade. Like now, for instance, this memory came in German, almost. And it's years since I've thought in German. I'm thinking in apparitions, not a language, but the ghost of a language. Brecht had the same secretive mouth as a mouth I kissed in the Café Europa. Now I know what it means to speak in tongues. I was remembering his pleasures, schreiben, pflanzen. The carpets in his house, which I think in fact were rugs. Helena Weigel in soft house shoes standing on them. And then, tell me how this happens, F. In a gasp, he was there, my baby son. My son in my mouth like a fox cub mewling. My whole breath glittered with him, bursting up for air from the bottom of a black lake. I hadn't even known I was descending it. A drowned mine, unexploded, and I am the waiting rupture of water above. Rumi says love flows down, but perhaps this is just because grief is just love with nowhere else to go. His cold field mouse feet, no bigger than my thumbprint, wet with blood. I wondered if I could ask F to stroke them the way I couldn't. How when it came to it, I just couldn't. Isn't that what we all want at the end, the midwife said, meaning to be kind? To be as close as we can be to the person who loves us most. But what I wanted was to go with him to the other world. The Vikings believed swans carried infants to the afterlife. It's true, swan mothers only sing when they're dying. So much space between at the end and in. Instead, I asked F about the problem I was having with a man, of course. Of course, she said, knowing it's never so simple. And anyway, the real problem is how I keep falling in love with impossible things, the wreckage of the craft, longing for the dark between the stars, but not the stars. The problem is also the afterglow, its swift, rare fade, and how I am half full of desire, but in a panic, like it's only ever going to be just once. And also that I stand there so long in the elevator, knowing it is broken, no button to make it ascend. And what are the underwater shadows, the two halves of the heart that do not speak to each other at all? A good day is when the feathers on the sunbeams are swan. The problem is, sometimes They're just a boy falling from the sky. The problem is everything is something amazing, and yet I don't know if a carpet is a rug, if a rug is a blanket. The problem is dialectics, and when is anything ever just once? And nobody really knows what happens when two neutron stars merge. There is a whole universe to observe, and love is fleeting. You have to be looking in the right place at exactly the right moment. The real problem is the odds. Did I say love? I meant light. Love is a form of becoming, F said wisely. Write that down. But all I could see was its remains, floating in the wake turbulence. St. Augustine, I murmured, feeling suddenly dark like a porcupine. Maybe I was dreaming now. My hands were like wings fretting at my scarf. Give it here, F said, and made a bowline knot, knowing how many times I had tripped on it. There you go. My body became a sailboat ready to go to sea. The porcupines were not the part that made me sure it was a dream. I wanted to tell her about the morning after the call, the shock of its happening, but I do not know the etiquette of describing living sensations to the dead. To speak of after when you are still in a place of before. When yours is the only body running into the road at 5 a.m., how everything became all at once. Everything hurtled to a single point of dawn, the opposite of creation. So much noise rushing in and the blossom throbbing out in a veil over the trees, even the gulls panting. The steps of the sky lit up gold or made of gold. You do not have to believe in heaven to know it was there. Behind the clouds, looking just the way Rossetti would have painted it. Pink gold sky primed 12 times, washed to gleaming. Something percussing in my chest, a violent thing like a stiletto heel. No one was moving across the world. The world had just stopped. This will become unimaginable soon. How once the earth said, hush, and everyone agreed. This is because evolution needs us to unlearn pain. The way after my first labour, I told a friend, I'd do that again tomorrow. But I was high on diamorphine, and the next day even pissing was a kind of torture. There was a bird flying south, a cat under a tree, a mouse decaying by the front doorstep, a woman in Adidas playing with a tiny dog. The habits of the world at this time of day felt like things I had never seen. The sky, a billow, a song, a prayer, and my heart savage, needing my whole body to cry. Not crying, but shrieking. I could hear the plates of my heart split, and you, F, suddenly, so far from everything, and also nothing at all. Never was there so much sky, which was just starlight and dust, which at any minute might disappear. I was my whole heart, and my heart was all outside me on its feet, like an animal. The closest, most life-sustaining bond is haunted by its opposite, says Anushka Gross of Freud's Death Drive. Or the Lustprinzip. I haven't read enough Freud to be sure. But F and I had long guessed this. Half hope, said the ink on my arm. Half agony came the echo of hers. I can't say if this makes me feel more alive or less, but only by spooning could we make the quote entire. My tea and olives arrive at our old table with a bill that includes the olives. I'm thinking of an Icelandic verse that says, life is long and art is short. But it's a special poetic form that's palindromic. Art is also long. Life is also short. Forget Knausgaard. A damnably inflected language, said Auden of Icelandic. Before he wrote of amazement and Daedalus's bird boy porpoising down from the heavens with a sea glaze in his eye. I'm not even sure when the mirror fell quiet and full of space again. Perhaps if I keep looking at all times. Is it possible you've gone away, F, just so you can return? The stars say nothing. They are brilliant. They are dead. There are so many of them now, waiting for the floor show to begin. A miracle in real time, this bright new comet blazing forth. Isti mirant stella. And we too marvel at the star. Or perhaps this is you, F, raging through. The marvel itself. See how you swallow everything. How astonishing that God doesn't seem to have disappeared.